We're here at Insight Motorsports with Scotty, the tuner from the Tilton EVO team, and we just thought we'd catch up and have a bit of a rundown after the weekend. Obviously, by now everyone knows that Tilton won World Time Attack 2014 with a 1:24.8. This year, though, was closer than ever with under Suzuki in the Scorch Racing S15, a mere 0.04 of a second off Tilton's time. Now, as usual, there's always a backstory that generally, unless you're involved in the team, you just don't get to hear. So we thought we'd catch up with Scotty and get that inside story. Now, I know we've already had a chat about this, and that last lap that Garth did there, the 1:24.8, let's be honest, that was anything but stellar. Can you tell us what actually was going on inside the car for that lap?
Well, actually, Garth did a really good job getting the car to the end, and I kind of think that I think the car just wanted to win, to be honest. We had troubles all weekend. He had problems, obviously, as everyone could see, with sparks flying everywhere, aero problems. We had power steering issues, just a number of niggling issues that you get with race cars, and we seem to be plagued with them all weekend. But it all come together in the end, only just.
Now, the car actually, well, let's step back. So from last year, Garth won the event outright, as he did this year. What changes were made over the 12 months till World Time Attack 2014?
The major changes were we put a paddle shift system in the car, and some people will note that we did actually have a paddle shift last year, but removed it on the basis that we didn't have enough time to get it sorted out in. And this year we went back to a paddle shift. We also done some suspension changes through some new MCA suspension, and also Voltex boys, they hit us up with some new aero package as well. So they were the major changes we had.
So more aero, more downforce, and with that generally comes a little bit more drag. Had you done anything in the engine department to up the power stakes for 2014?
This year we did nothing to the engine in terms of performance. We were looking to with some turbo modifications, but we ran out of time with other preparation issues with the car. So we decided to stay with the original power plant.
Let's go back into the earlier part of the weekend, and at one point there's photos of the car actually with an engine bay fire. Can you talk us through what happened there?
Yeah, we've been plagued with some power steering issues, and what it turned out to be is we had some mechanical issues with the new suspension geometry, and that caused a lot of problems for the hydraulics, and we've been struggling with it, really, to be honest, since we started testing, and we really only got our head around it on the last day. So without getting that sorted, I don't think we'd be standing having this conversation.
With that engine bay fire, obviously fire and race cars don't go too well together, and Garth was lucky enough to get the thing stopped pretty close to a marshal point and got that fire under control quickly. I understand there was some damage, some issues that caused to the wiring harness, is that right?
Yes, we lost a lot of the major systems intermittently, and a lot of the data we just didn't have. We didn't have any GPS data. A lot of the engine sensor data was sort of coming and going, and it was a big cause of concern. And we honestly didn't really have a lot of good hopes for the car actually taking out the event on the basis that someone was more than likely maybe going to push our first time, and the car just decided to get us to the end.
Now, previous to that last flying lap where Garth got it all together, you'd had the car cutting out and dropping boost during the laps?
Yes, you would get the odd cut here or there or issue, and in some cases the driver didn't notice anything, and it was just we would see it in the data and knew something was going on. And it was obviously a fire-related issue because it was fine before then, and a few keen viewers might see the actual winning lap at the end. The engine's performance was slightly reduced towards the end, and we started losing boost, and some of the systems started failing on us, and then the cool down lap to come back again as well. So
that was actually coming on to the start finish straight on that flying lap.
Yeah, right just before the end. If you look closely, you may see a little drop of performance. It would have affected the time. It's hard to tell because the we don't really have very good data to go off anymore because of the problems. But yeah, we might have lost possibly a tenth, I'm guessing, just on that.
Now, Obviously, the whole World Time Attack event, the level of competition has stepped up tremendously over the 3 years HPA have been attending, and we've seen that. Our Aero's stepping up, we've got more downforce than ever, we've got more drag, unfortunately, than ever as well. And I just wanted to talk about that drag and how that affects it, because we're talking about the drag, particularly down the front straight. What sort of maximum speeds are you getting out of the Tilton EVO?
We're seeing around 290 kilometres an hour with this package as it is, and it's probably very close to equivalent to what we're seeing last year, and slower than what we'd seen in the first years with the car when the Aero was less.
So with that, to actually make the car go faster down that straight, you're saying pretty much the car comes up to about 280k straight off the corner really quickly, and then it's like hitting a brick wall, and you really, it becomes exponentially more difficult to go faster?
Very much so. It's we've pushed the car harder than we've ever pushed it, including last year, and yeah, it's apparent that there is a very big brick wall in terms of aero to try to find that top speed out of the car.
Again, this isn't a full-time occupation, and we're not talking about an F1 team with unlimited budgets to testing, but where do you feel the balance, I guess, lies between that drag and downforce? I mean, could the car potentially be quicker in an ultimate lap time if the drag and downforce were reduced a little? Obviously, that's going to affect cornering speed, but then top speed in a straight line will increase. Where's that balance in your opinion?
I think you've touched on a complicated subject, and it may not be the same under all conditions, but certainly my gut feeling suggests that there could be a compromise in between possibly last year's Aero and this year's Aero, maybe, in terms of outright performance. But it's very difficult to tell unless you can really spend the time nutting through the data to work out where you need to be. But certainly the straight does tell you, it gives you a good idea of the drag of where the car's at, and at least if you can start seeing good high speeds, at least it can tell you that your Aero is a low drag system. So
now, we witnessed the Tilton EVO scraping at the end of that front straight just before Garth turned into turn one, and speaking to Shane Van Gisbergen, who's obviously got a lot of experience around Eastern Creek in a V8 supercar, he's saying in the MC8 Hammerhead he's braking 50 metres later than in a V8 supercar. So there's no doubt at all that Aero, that downforce, is working exceptionally well. From your data, can you tell us how many Gs the car's actually able to pull in a corner?
we can pull over 2 Gs commonly with the aero package in our car, which is somewhat mind-boggling, really.
Just to put that in perspective, some of the race classes, more conventional race classes on full slip tyres that I'm used to crewing in, you know, we're seeing maybe lateral Gs of 1.5, 1.6, so that is definitely a massive step up. Now, talking about engine power, can you talk us through the engine package in the Tilton EVO and tell us what's making up that engine package?
Well, this is it's basically a 2.1 litre 4G63 Evo 9 engine. It runs a BorgWarner EFR 9180 turbocharger, running all the hypertune components in terms of the intercooler, radiator, inlet manifold, and so forth. And it runs a full Motec system controlling the engine, and obviously all the goodies inside to keep it alive. And it runs an Insight Motorsport's dry sump system as well, which is one of the main factors contributing to keeping the engine alive.
In terms of boost pressure you're punching out of that thing and how much power it's producing, can we have some insight into that?
Yeah, well, a good estimate would be around 950 horsepower the engine's producing, which is higher than what we were operating at last year. But it's only because we chose to try to run a little bit more this year to obviously make up for some of the issues we had. And we're over 40 PSI of boost this year with the engine.
Now, in that BorgWarner EFR series, you're running the 9180. That is the largest in that series. Is that at the moment holding you back? Is that a problem?
I wouldn't say it's holding us back, but it's reached certainly close to the limitations of what it's designed to do in terms of performance and airflow. It's such a reliable system. It's something we never have to think about. So I still think it's the ultimate sort of time attack turbocharger at this time. But yes, we are running into a limitation with the turbo if we want to chase more horsepower.
Now, we were talking as well earlier about the boost response, and that might probably surprise some people because power levels of 950 horsepower out of a 2.1 litre engine. Those are normally probably associated with more high RPM drag applications. So you've been telling me that this actually has a really wide power band and comes on boost really early. Can you tell us about that power band?
Yeah, basically we operate up to around 9,000 RPM peak, but the engine can produce torque anywhere from sort of low 3 to 4,000 RPM range all the way through to 9,000. In fact, we actually limit the torque of the engine in the lower RPM to prevent surge issues associated with high boost, low airflow.
So that surge is really where the turbo is producing so much airflow that the engine just at low RPM can't consume it. How are you limiting or preventing that surge? Is that simply through boost control? Have you got something a bit flashy going on?
We look at boost control, so obviously we opened the wastegates earlier to reduce the speed of the turbine, of course, and the intake as well. We allow for a little bit of air to escape in that circumstance. And generally during the race lap, none of these systems tend to need to come into place. So it's more likely if he maybe short shifts a gear or does something wrong from a driver perspective, then those systems might come in.
So on a perfect lap where everything's just going right and he's on the money and on the shift points, then that's not going to be an issue?
It will not be a concern at all, no.
Now, if you've got such good boost response and such good boost response from such low RPM, that would suggest that maybe the engine would quite happily take a larger turbo?
I think so, yeah. I certainly think so for sure.
It'll be interesting to see on that front what happens next year as the game steps up further. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the suspension in light of the amount of downforce these cars are producing, and we talked a little bit earlier about the problems that's facing, particularly, let's talk about that entry into turn one where the car's at maximum speed and the downforce is really compressing that front suspension. What challenges does that give you from keeping control over the suspension?
Well, basically, obviously when we set up the car, it needs to be able to be good around the whole circuit. And there's a lot of teams do put a lot of work into making turn one perform as best as possible because there is quite some time in turn one. And I think at the top level, I think turn one is, I wouldn't say it's the key, but it certainly is an area where you can gain time very easily. And if the suspension setup's not right there, it will significantly limit your potential lap time just based on turn one. The goal is it's not so difficult to get turn one right with the balance of the package of the aero to the suspension. The problem is when you're trying to link up the rest of the lap by setting the suspension up in such a way.
I'm getting it as well more at that high speed. You're getting a lot of compression in the suspension. The car's actually physically sitting lower because of that immense amount of downforce. So is there anything particular you're doing to cope with that increased downforce at high speed?
Yeah, well, obviously at the highest speed, approaching turn one is the highest speed on the track that we're going to approach it at, and the compression's massive. So we would use systems to limit the travel and so forth with the suspension. So we can arrive at a spring rate that's suitable, but also allow us to limit that travel if need be.
Okay, so 124.8 for 2014, and obviously we've found out it wasn't exactly the perfect lap that Garth was hoping for. I guess you've got some ideas in mind for what's going to happen for 2015, next year's World Time Attack. If everything went in your favour, all the systems work, and Garth manages to put in that perfect lap, how far do you see this going? Where could we expect to see the Tilton EVO next year?
I think if we are to run this vehicle in its current platform without doing too many future developments, I certainly think a low 24 is very possible, and possibly a high 23 is where it's at. Whether that will win, I'm unsure.
We have seen a huge step up in performance from a lot of the teams, and particularly in that Pro Open class, that there is more competition than ever, and particularly the two-wheel drive cars are now starting to catch up. Look, we can't wait to see how everything pans out next year and what advances in technology will be applied. Thanks for giving us some inside views as to what happened for 2014 in the Tilton EVO. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you, Andre.
For online tuning courses, visit learntotune.com.